Now, 7 parties have announced that they'll be holding their first national convention next month. It's aimed at unseating the ANC. This is for the 2024 elections. The DA, Action SA, Freedom Front Plus, the IFP, among those that are part of talks. Action SA's Michael Beaumont says the convention must build confidence in a multi-party alternative.
Let's be real, that the local government coalition experience hasn't been a good one. And no one wants to see that kind of instability being imported into the running of national government. And I think a lot of lessons have been learnt in that regard, but also we're going into these talks with those scars fully, but at the same time appreciating it can't poison the national conversation. The fact that things haven't worked out well at a local government coalition level here in Gauteng can't mean that we're going to give up the fight in 2024. We've got to come together, we've got to build trust along the way as we work to build that alternative.
Well, among some of the issues that the convention plans to deal with is a formula on how a cabinet would be constituted. That is, if you don't have one party that has an outright majority. Build One South Africa is on the fence about whether it will be part of these discussions. The formations leader, Mmusi Maimane, joins us in studio. Mr. Maimane, good evening to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to come to studio tonight. Firstly, there seems to be quite a number of at least big political parties that have come together. You do have those that are also sort of unknown, or at least haven't made quite a significant footprint nationally. But I think by and large, there's lobbying to get people on board. One, in terms of your organization, Build One South Africa, where do you stand?
Look, I think firstly, Kathy, it's important to recognize that next year is a significant election. And secondly, and along with that, is even if you put all the parties together, as is the moonshot pact argument, there's still a deficit of 12%. And so from where we sit as Build One South Africa, we asked ourselves the question, where are the unregistered voters going to put their cross? Secondly, there are voters who are disillusioned with some of the parties, having seen what's happened at local government and dissatisfied with the ANC. How do we bring them together so that we build that 12%? And furthermore, how do we ensure that the alternative vision is not just a vision to unseat the ANC? I think that's where part of my problem lies, is that if you just position it as, let's go remove the ANC, I think South Africans accept that point. They accept that we need change. What they don't know is, what will the change look like? Will that change involve a new form of governing? What are the benefits to them in terms of lights, water, security, education? Those questions have not been put on the table. So if the only activity is let's just remove the ANC, you end up with exactly the same exercise as we had at local government elections, which we cannot have at national.
There are a number of things I want to pick up on, but before we do that, let's rewind. You talk about a 12% deficit. Let's make sure we're working off the same sort of stats and figures. 12% deficit in what?
So in other words, if you're going to form 51%, all the parties you've just cited together end up at 38% or so, if you took 2019 figures together.
Okay, that's what I wanted to be clear about.
And even if the ANC was to lose its majority, you've got to solve for what is a sensible center that holds. There are citizens who don't endorse part of what some of the parties who are in there stand for. The citizens I'm worried about are those who say, look, I'm non-racial, I want a working government, I want ethical leadership, I don't want to be in partnership with people who've stolen money or whatever. I don't want to be in partnership with racists. I actually just want to make sure that I can have a decent day's work, keep my kids safe, educate them. Who's talking to those people? The young people. 2 out of 3 young people are not even registered to vote. And as I've spent time in schools speaking to young people about them, no one is talking to them in the political frame. So it doesn't mean automatically, if you merge everybody, you're going to be talking to those kids. That doesn't mean that. And I hate even the term calling them kids, because they called me out on it. So I want to focus on those young people, look at their issues, say how do we create a conversation with them so that they do turn out and vote for that centrist middle.
This idea of political parties getting together to unseat the ANC, one of the questions that arises that, well, that's the role of opposition anyway. If you can't do it individually in the different organizations that you represent, how are you going to do it together? There's also the question of the latest figures, I believe, will put that figure at around 25% of the voting population that is basically on the fence. So these are the guys that people like yourself and other opposition parties are really wanting to win over. Many of them would be former ANC voters, and to say, well, come to us, trust us with your vote. Do you think that enough work is actually being done to convince this average of 25% of the voting population, registered voters, to come out and vote and to give that vote in support of opposition parties?
It's precisely why when I responded to the invitation by the leader of the DA, I said, here's a 10-point plan. In that 10-point plan, I made it quite clear. Starting off is about healthcare, it's about safety. It's all the issues that South Africans are grappling with. Because if you don't posit a vision, my parents are former ANC voters. They don't want a vision that just simply says oppose the ANC. They want a vision that says what does the life of their grandkids look like post. Because I actually want ANC voters to vote for us, to vote for Build One South Africa. Why? Because they can see a vision for themselves that says, actually, they are also tired of the ANC. They want a world after that. So that's the job we've got to do. Today we can discuss even Russia-Ukraine. Those are old historical alliances by the ANC. ANC voters want to know who are our new alliances, what is the modern world we want to see. So that's the job we've got to do, and that's the work I've invested in. So a moonshot pact, there's another formulation called twosome, there are a number of them, they are all occurring. We represent communities, citizens, South Africans who are disillusioned. We've got to have a conversation with them. Our system, as a proportional representative system, allows us a post facto agreement, and even if we had to have one before, it better be based on vision, values, before it agrees on just saying, what does the cabinet look like and who's going to do that?
Mmusi, when we look at the figures, again, we can go back to 2019 elections. The reality of our election trends over time is that we have graphs that are sort of going in two different directions. The number of those contesting the elections is going up. The number of those participating in the elections is going down. And that, for me, is an indictment also on the political parties that are contesting that electoral space, because it says what is being offered, what is being brought on the table is not really resonating with the voting population. How do you think political parties are going to overcome that burden? Because in as much as everybody's working off this frame that says the ANC may well move below 50% majority. But what happens when only, let's say, 6 million people come out to vote, and the majority of those voters are ANC voters, which we know the ANC traditionally has been very good at doing. So what happens if they're still able to maintain a majority, even though it is of a very small voting population?
You know, your ideals must outlive electoral scoreboards. Because I think there are people who are like me who care about the same things. And their values must be represented on the ballot. So the struggle here isn't just to amass numbers, in simple terms. The struggle here is to say, our citizens who are non-racial, who believe in the things that we believe in the value of Ubuntu, going to be represented on the ballot. But let me further on go. One of the things I've engaged with in the recent while is actually to go out and listen to voters. You know, often voters are sitting at home going, no one talks to us. You only come to us when you want votes and you deliver food parcels, etc. Let's go listen to them. And you know, as I've been listening to young people, they are telling me that they're like anyone else. They are worried about the prospects of finding a job. Now, we can't just stand up and just pontificate on, well, we'll remove this one and do this one. We need to come back to those young people and say to them, we think the economy must grow. Here's how we create a job. And I've been speaking to them about a national civilian service where they can spend a year working on an internship program delivering. That's a program that young people can say, when I go cast my vote, it isn't just for BOSA, but it is for my own jobs or my own prospects. So the question you are asking is precisely why an alternative vision ought to be crafted and foreground any other work that's going to be done. And we need to listen to people. I think we've lost democracy globally. The reason why the problem you are describing is not unique to South Africa, it's true in the US, it's true elsewhere, is because political principles stop listening to people and they stop engaging communities. That's why I've also been deliberate at saying, before you tell me which candidates, before I come to you before the elections and say, vote for the following candidates, I've gone out to communities and said, show me your candidates. 458 people have applied for the program so that we can get those people to represent their communities. That's direct democracy, because actual political activism is happening all day, all along. There are people protesting in Soweto today. There are people protesting everywhere about immigration and many issues. I'm saying to those people, we can protest all we like. Give me a candidate that comes from your community who will stand for your community and your issues. And let's make sure when we go to the National Assembly, those issues are represented. So that when you vote, it's consequential.
Mmusi, just a last one. Is the reason why you are also not part of these talks or this convention because ultimately the structure with which you and the candidates you represent are going to contest elections is different to perhaps that of these political parties? So effectively, you're their competition in some ways. In
many ways. And that's why I've written even to the pact and to the leader of the DA to say, I want you to understand where we're coming from, and I want to understand better where you're coming from. Because I, like any other South African, recognize that next year we're going to have to bring South Africans together. But that mustn't be the first goal. The first goal is about, this is what I do, this is how we do it, this is who we're trying to bring on the table. Let's see if we can have collaboration. Let's not force something because we think that the only objective is to defeat the ANC. Right. Let's live for something.
All right. Mmusi Maimane will leave there for tonight. He is with Build One South Africa.